Good morning and welcome to be seated. Okay, we are on the record. We are in Division 17 of the Weld County District Court, and we are here regarding Weld County case number 18CR2003, people of the state of Colorado versus Christopher Lee Watts. My name is Marcelo Cupcom, a District Court Judge here in Weld County, and I will be the presiding judge in this case. If I could please have the lawyers identify themselves in the record, starting with the prosecution.
Good morning, Your Honor. Michael Rourke on behalf of the people. Patrick Roach on behalf of the people.
Your Honor, John Walsh on behalf of the defense. Jim Burson on behalf of Mr. Watts. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Rourke, do you want to make a record regarding compliance with the Victims' Rights Act?
Yes, Your Honor. We are in compliance with the Victims' Rights Act. Frank Rusick, who is Shanann.
On August 13, 2018, the mask of an ordinary man shattered. Chris Watts, a seemingly quiet father and husband living in Frederick, Colorado, was unmasked as a killer who destroyed the very people who trusted him most. His wife, Shanann, 15 weeks pregnant with their son Nico. His two young daughters, Bella and Celeste. What appeared from the outside to be a family filled with laughter and social media smiles concealed a hidden storm, one that ended in unthinkable violence. The murders sent shockwaves across America and beyond. Neighbors who once waved at Watts on his driveway now stared at television screens in disbelief. Friends who had shared dinners with Shanann struggled to process her disappearance, then her brutal death. The case gripped the nation not just for its brutality, but for its betrayal. This was not a faceless criminal. This was a father, a husband, a man who blended into suburbia until the day he tore his family apart. In November 2018, just 3 months after the murders, justice was handed down. Chris Watts stood in a Colorado courtroom and received one of the harshest punishments the American justice system allows. 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy. 36 more years for hiding the bodies of his wife and children. The message was clear. Chris Watts would never breathe free air again. But sentencing was not the end of this story. It was the beginning of another. A story hidden from the public eye, unfolding far from news cameras. A story not of murders, but of survival inside a cage. What happens to a man who annihilated his family once the world turns its back? What becomes of him when the daily headlines vanish, and only the silence of a prison cell remains? Shortly after his sentencing, Watts was moved, not to remain in Colorado, but quietly transferred hundreds of miles away to Wisconsin. Authorities made the decision for one reason: safety. In the hierarchy of prison society, men who kill children are despised. And Chris Watts, whose case had dominated national news, was a marked man from the moment he stepped inside. In Colorado, he would not have survived long. The transfer was designed to keep him alive. He was placed at Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin, a facility built not just to hold men, but to manage the most difficult and notorious. Watts entered under protective custody. His cell was isolated. His contact with other inmates was heavily restricted. Guards monitored him closely. Every precaution reflected a single reality. Without protection, Chris Watts would be dead. But protection carries its own form of punishment. Separation from all others. Days reduced to routines with no friendships, no community, and very little human contact. Chris Watts entered Dodge not as a man among men, but as a shadow, sealed off, watched constantly, surviving in isolation. And this is where the real story begins. Beyond the trial, beyond the headlines. This is the story of Chris Watts behind bars. The silence, the rituals, the psychology of a family annihilator living the rest of his life inside a cage. When Chris Watts entered Dodge Correctional Institution, he entered a world ruled not just by guards, but by an invisible code, the hierarchy of inmates. In this unspoken order, crimes define worth. At the top are those who lead prison gangs or command respect through violence. At the bottom are those who harm women and children. For them, survival is uncertain, every day a new risk. Chris Watts, a man who killed his wife and daughters, was destined for the very lowest tier. Prison officials knew this. The moment he arrived, he was placed in protective custody. His cell was kept separate from the general population. Movement outside the cell was carefully controlled, always under guard escort. He could not walk freely in the yard or mingle in the dining hall. Every precaution was taken to limit his contact with other inmates, because in the unwritten rules of prison justice, Chris Watts was already condemned. Isolation spared him from attacks, but it came with its own kind of torment. Protective custody means confinement in a cell for most hours of the day. While the general population may work jobs, attend classes, or socialize in the yard, Watts' world was stripped bare. For walls, a narrow bed, a steel toilet, and a slot in the door for his meals. The silence becomes its own form of punishment. Meals are brought to him. Breakfast early in the morning, often before sunrise. Lunch and dinner simple, repetitive, eaten alone. There is no choosing what to eat, no conversation across a table. Just food delivered, consumed in silence, and the tray passed back through the slot. Recreation, when allowed, is controlled. Inmates in protective custody may be escorted alone to a secure cage-like yard for brief exercise, watched closely by guards. For Chris Watts, even this limited time outside is heavily monitored. There is no real freedom, no chance to blend into the anonymity of the prison population. His world shrank the moment he entered protective custody, and it remains small, confined, and repetitive. The monotony is relentless. Prison psychologists describe it as the slow erosion of self. Days bleed into nights, weeks into years. With no meaningful activity and little human contact, the mind begins to deteriorate. For Watts, isolation is survival, but it is also a sentence within a sentence, a life of silence designed to keep him alive. Life in Dodge Correctional Institution is governed by routine. Lights on at dawn. Roll call. Meals delivered at set times. For Chris Watts, every day looks the same. There are no surprises, no choices, no freedom. The very act of living becomes mechanical, a cycle of repetition that grinds the mind down. He does not work a prison job. He does not attend programs in groups. His protective custody status limits nearly every activity. Much of his day is spent inside his cell, reading, writing, or staring at the walls. Occasionally, he is escorted for showers or medical checks, always under the watchful eyes of guards. Inmates like Watts live under constant surveillance, their existence controlled to the smallest detail. Family annihilators often crave control. Their crimes are sometimes triggered by a loss of authority over their families or their lives. In prison, Watts has no control at all. He cannot decide when to eat, when to shower, or when to sleep. He cannot walk outside unless permitted. Every aspect of his life is dictated by the prison system. For a man once desperate to control everything, this loss of power is itself a crushing punishment. Letters are his only real connection to the outside world. Reports confirm he receives them regularly, mostly from strangers. Some are curious. Some are angry. Many are from women who express admiration, affection, or even love. This bizarre phenomenon, where killers receive fan mail, is well documented. For Watts, these letters are a reminder that while society has condemned him, he still exists in someone's imagination. But prison mail is no lifeline to freedom. Every letter is screened, monitored, and often scrutinized by staff. He cannot communicate freely. His words are watched. His only contact with the outside is filtered, leaving him both connected and controlled. The number stamped on his records, number 674796, is now his identity. Chris Watts, the man, no longer exists in daily life. Only the inmate remains. In isolation, Chris Watts turned to religion. Reports from those who have corresponded with him confirm that he spends much of his time reading the Bible. He has claimed that faith gives him strength, that he has found God behind bars. To some, this is repentance. To others, it is a coping mechanism, a way to survive the silence and monotony of prison life. Religion in prison is common. For many inmates, faith becomes a structure in a world of chaos. But for Watts, faith has a deeper weight. His crime destroyed a family that once prayed, celebrated holidays, and shared moments of normal life. Now, alone, the Bible is both his companion and his shield. Alongside his faith comes the strange phenomenon of letters. Women from across the country, and sometimes across the world, write to him. They offer sympathy, affection, sometimes even romantic interest. Psychologists call this hybristophilia, the attraction to those who commit violent crimes. It is not unique to Chris Watts. Other infamous men, like Ted Bundy or Scott Peterson, have received similar attention. But the letters highlight a disturbing truth. Even the most hated can attract fascination. For Watts, these letters are a reminder that he still exists beyond the prison walls. That someone, somewhere, still says his name. They are a lifeline, however fragile. Yet they also deepen the divide between reality and fantasy. The women see a man they imagine they can understand or save. Watts sees validation, even in his lowest place. But the truth remains. No letter can undo the reality of his crimes, or the silence of his cell. Those who have interacted with him in prison describe him as quiet, polite, compliant. A model inmate. He does not cause trouble. He does not rebel. On the surface, he appears calm. But beneath the surface lies the reality. A man living a life stripped of freedom, stripped of family, defined forever by the crime that put him there. Chris Watts belongs to a category criminologists call family annihilators. Men who destroy their entire families in moments of collapse. They are rare, but their crimes terrify society because they occur within the walls of homes, in the places meant to be safe. Family annihilators often share traits. They struggle with control. They face personal or financial collapse. They cannot accept failure. And rather than face shame, they choose to erase their families completely. Forensic psychologists describe it as a twisted solution to pressure, a way to start over, free from responsibility, even if it means destroying the innocent. John List murdered his wife, mother, and children in 1971, then vanished for nearly 2 decades before capture. Scott Peterson was sentenced to life for the murder of his wife Lacey and their unborn son, a case that also dominated headlines. Chris Watts joins this grim lineage, but his case stands apart. Unlike List, he did not run. Unlike Peterson, he confessed quickly. His punishment began almost immediately. Psychologists note that his behavior in prison reflects a pattern seen in other family annihilators. Withdrawn, polite, absorbed in faith, they often retreat into ritual, avoiding confrontation, hiding in compliance. On the surface, they appear transformed. But experts caution, this is survival, not redemption. The mind adapts to confinement by creating order, but the crime remains unchanged. For society, Watts' case is a window into the psychology of betrayal. How someone who looked ordinary, who smiled in photos, who seemed to be a loving father, could commit the ultimate crime. And how, in prison, that same man becomes a shadow of himself, surviving day by day, but never escaping the memory of what he did. Today, Chris Watts remains at Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin. He is 40 years old. He will never leave these walls alive. His sentences are stacked so heavily that parole is not possible. He will live and die behind bars. For Shanann's family, the Rizuseks, this reality brings only partial peace. They will never see Shanann, Bella, Celeste, or baby Nico again. No punishment can restore what was lost. But the certainty that Watts will never walk free is one guarantee the justice system could give. His life now is silence. No internet. No social media. No daily conversations. No chance to rebuild. Just a Bible, letters from strangers, and the endless repetition of prison life. He may live. He may breathe. But freedom, family, and normal life are gone forever. For some, this is justice. For others, it raises questions. Is living in silence enough punishment for a man who destroyed his family? Or is the weight of conscience the cruelest prison of all? We cannot see inside his mind. But we know this. His cage is built of both steel and memory. He is alive, but his name, his life, and his legacy are buried forever. Do you believe this is true justice? Is a life spent in isolation enough for Chris Watts? Or should punishment mean something more? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more documentaries that explore the darkest corners of psychology and crime, subscribe and join us as we uncover them together.